and welcome back to the Airing It Out podcast. This is episode 3. We're still working on getting things underway, so this is all still relatively new to us, but from the last 2 episodes that we did, we saw a little bit of an improvement, so getting a little bit more comfortable, getting a little bit more acquainted with the whole setup, with speaking in front of the cameras, and we're looking forward to getting these episodes out to you. Today we're going to be talking about therapy. It's kind of dispelling some of the stigmas and taking it from this unknown and kind of scary concept and shining a little bit of light on it through my experiences. So, you're a little bit more knowledgeable and can learn a little bit more about it. But first and foremost, I'm going to take this little nameless fella that we have here, my heart. I'm just going to pop him back up there. Okay, let's get into it. So when I was doing my research for this episode and developing the kind of plan for it, I wanted to try and, straight off the bat, this is what therapy is. But given the sheer breadth of what therapy can entail, given the quantity of issues, and it's very reflective of the human mind in itself, in that it's the most complex engine that we have known to our existence. So to have one kind of definition that underpins every kind of issue that might need troubleshooting, if we're running along with that metaphor, that you or an individual may encounter within their life. It's a bit of a futile effort to say therapy is this. But my way of defining it, what I came up with, was getting help for problems that you may be unequipped or unaware of how to fix. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. We go through our lives, and one thing for certain, like my dad always says, the only certainty in life, the one thing that you can be sure of, is change. And that can be for positive or for negative. But to think that you'll only ever experience positive things in your life, unfortunately, that's not how it goes. You may encounter problems which stick with you for a long time. You may find yourself getting stuck in the mud. You may feel like you can't leave something behind, or there's a wire which has crossed somewhere along the lines and you don't know how to fix it. You want to fix it. You want to move on. You want some help. And so therapy can often be an avenue to help you overcome or understand or rehabilitate yourself towards self-improvement. So what it isn't just is therapy, to those who don't know a whole lot about it, it isn't just lying down on a long sofa and having some quizzical, educated man or woman with glasses and a notepad look deeply into your essence and ask you lots of difficult questions about your childhood. I mean, there are certain things within that which do ring true with certain types of therapy, but it doesn't encompass what it is as a whole. There are so many different kinds of therapy, as I mentioned, for so many different kinds of issues or problems that, the wide spectrum of individuality may may develop. We'll go with develop. Yeah, so it's not, as the Americans call it, a shrink, just poking around in your headspace and your brain area and trying to needle their way into what's really going on in here. I think therapy, particularly from that era of post-World War II, became very demonized because, like I've mentioned this in one of the prior episodes, the British idea of the keep calm and carry on, it purveys and champions this idea of an individual needing to be strong and resolute and able to overcome whatever it is that may inevitably be coming their way. But after the war, the need for that, although helpful, has slowly, I think, deteriorated in its efficacy as it's been faced with the new challenges of our modern day world. So I think while people are still trying to uphold that, or they're generationally being given this idea of how to handle their problems, it isn't quite being sustained in our modern world. But the stigmas and stereotypes, along with this idea, very much do still linger on. And I think simply by unpacking these kinds of things, not only unpacking these old ways of thinking, but unpacking the realities of the things which are demonized or looked down upon or are seen through a particular lens, could be very beneficial. So I've had a few different experiences with therapy, mainly 3. I have mentioned in previous episodes that my mental illnesses, it began with anxiety, which is trauma-based. It's, being like infected by an irrational fear, like a consistent irrational fear. The fear itself doesn't make sense, but it's there, and it's that almost constant reactive fight or flight situation or reaction within your brain. And depression. My depression came after that. But we'll talk a little bit about that. So the first one that I did, I was about 17. I'd just gone from high school to college, and I tried to get through the first year of college, but I was incredibly isolated, incredibly scared, very much so irrationally. A lot of the things I was, dreading. I felt like I was constantly burdened by this looming dread. There are things that I would go on to do every single day. So while they meant absolute cataclysmic doomsday to me on those days, I learned to manage them. I learned how to overcome them, and I learned to understand them. But it came about, the first therapy that I did came about when I mentioned again in a previous episode, when I acknowledged, or it was brought to my awareness that something wasn't right, that we went to my doctor and went and spoke to him, and he had a look at me and sat me down and said, okay, well, I might know somebody who might be able to give you a hand. He isn't with the NHS or he isn't associated with the government, but he's a private counsellor, and he deals very much so in children's therapy. And although I was bordering on the kind of age limit, he thought, I don't know whether it was because it was given my scenario or whatever reason, he thought it would be appropriate for me to go and see this guy. And yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience, because it was this guy who'd been a private children's therapist for 40 odd years. An absolutely massive house. One of the first impressions I got was, it's not a fucking bad way to make a living. And he had this studio around the back of this house. And yeah, my mum had told me that he had been a sufferer of abuse when he was younger. And yeah, one of the interesting kind of connections that I made from that was, you could see that in all these sculptures and arts that he'd cultivated in and around this studio. They were almost they were the expressions of his trauma. Those were a way in which that he dealt with his trauma, by creating, by expressing, and getting what was within him out artistically. But that is neither here nor there. What I needed from it was, seeing as though this was the beginning of my therapy journey, it was all very new to me, and it was all very scary, and it was a lot of exercises, it was the unpacking. It was the first kind of introspective beginning to dive deep into what was going on inside my head, what was happening, what were the triggers, what were the causes, what if we followed the channels in my mind were the very causes of all these issues which were affecting me on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I remember a number of different activities that we did. Some of them were simply a matter of writing down friends and family, people that come to mind, people who affect you positively in your life, people who affect you negatively in your life. Essentially, my anxiety came down to a series of traumatic events, which had, I mentioned one of them before, I believe one of them was drug-induced at a festival. It was one of the first times I had taken ecstasy, and it was, yeah, a group. I was on my own, stupidly enough, at a festival when I was like 16, 17, watching Main Stage Knife Party. What a friendly, welcoming name. And they were just as friendly and hospitable as their title would entail. I was watching them on my own, and I don't know what it was. Something happened, and I just went into this intense, like the most intense state of terror. My psychology or mental state completely flipped 180. You know, you're on ecstasy, this artificially induced state of euphoria, and it was just as if the poles had been flipped upside down. So they were on, and yeah, I was absolutely fucking terrified, and it stuck with me. And I thought people were gonna get me in this crowd. I thought people were there. They were circling me. I kept move around, and I thought, oh, these people are still following me. They're circling me. And I had to get out, and I had to get out, and I had to get out. And I tried, and I kept thinking I was being followed, and I went back and found the people that I was with. But yeah, it just stuck with me. It stuck with me. I could never get it out. The sheer intensity of the fear that I felt, it didn't leave me. I didn't come back from something like that. If I was sober, it might have been different. But the way of it is that I wasn't. I was on drugs. And that, I do believe, I have no problem saying, probably dramatically affected the extent to which I was traumatized. And since then, upon reflections, there are a few other accounts, but that particular instance happened the summer before I went to college. So that was kind of ripe and fresh in my mind, and I couldn't get rid of it. No matter where I went, there was always that fear. That fear was always there, and it only became worse the more unfamiliar an environment I was put in. So college, new place, new friends, haha, new people, new colleagues, new work, new skills. So that needed to be worked on. And it ended up that it got to a point, you have all these barriers and these defenses. If like my anxiety was rooted in fear, naturally a reaction is to have self-defense mechanisms. You put up these walls so that anybody from the outside scary world doesn't get closer, doesn't see what's within. But a big part of therapy was establishing that trust, knowing that I could talk to this person, that I was safe within their hands, and that I could share these things without having it thrown back at me. And I told my therapist about this event, and he was just like, oh, what did he do? He always scratched his head like this. He would go, oh, yes. I don't know why, but I remember him doing that after I told him, like, as if like he was thinking, fucking finally, we got down to it. It wasn't the single thing which caused it, but that was probably the biggest contributor. And after I told me, he said, I think we should tell your parents. And I was just like, oh my God, like, you want to tell my parents this? And I was just like, oh my, I'm going to get in so much trouble. We brought them in, and he told them, I don't think I told them. He told them what had happened, and that I'd done drugs at a festival, and that I thought I could have been stabbed or fucking jumped or something completely horrendous. But yeah, they were okay with it. I mean, obviously, they're not like completely blasé about the fact their son did drugs and whatnot, but they were understanding, and they didn't, it was like what's done is done, and move on from that and trying to rehabilitate you back to getting better. Yeah, the experience itself was pretty surreal as someone who had never really, someone from a position of complete ignorance or not knowing, going into something like this, which was quite intense. And it's not that it felt intrusive, but it felt like this is it was territory that I hadn't gone into yet. It was territory that I hadn't explored. And so that was kind of unfamiliar and unwelcome in its own sense, but it was effective. There are criticisms that I'd have for it, but the bottom line is it did help me with my anxiety. It was the understanding that fear. It was removing the veil of unknown, of mystery, and getting acquainted with what it was that was bringing me this fear. And it gave me many useful tools to dealing with anxiety and fear in itself. Like now, when something scares me, it's about looking that fear in the eye and saying, why does it scare me? What is it about you which creates this reaction with me? Like I mentioned, it's removing that veil from it and seeing what lies underneath. Yeah, it was effective. It was very effective. And it did help me overcome my anxiety, my clinical anxiety. So the next kind of therapy that I did was CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And this was I went back to my doctor. Something still wasn't right. I still wasn't the person that I was, or the person that I thought I ought to be, or at least my parents thought I ought to be. Maybe I was just miserable. But I went back to my doctor and said, okay, I've done the anxiety part, but I'm still fucking unhappy. And yeah, the CBT, I think, is a government-linked therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. So that is kind of looking at the patterns within your behavior and your mindset and how you approach things on like a daily or weekly basis, seeing what kind of things are tried, tested, and true to work in favor of having a more balanced and positive well-being, essentially. So I'd go there each week and I'd sit down with somebody. No, first thing I'd do is you fill out this form. You say how you're doing. Are you feeling happy? Are you doing anything with yourself? Just the normal checklist. And always at the bottom is, do you have thoughts of suicide? And it always came down to that. And I was just like, More often than not, yes, I did. And I think that's why I was probably there for as long as I was. But yeah, it was a matter of going over a week, trying to plan out things for my week that I could do, people around me, activities that I could do, exercise, absolutely paramount to well-being, things that I could get going within my own life, and just kind of helping you lay the foundation for acting upon things which ought to, in theory, improve your day-to-day life. But my problem then was, like, I've spoken about it before, after my anxiety, it was as if I'd broken through this glass ceiling. I'd broken through the glass ceiling of anxiety, of absolute terror and fear. But on the other side of it, with the side which I was now on, with the side which I'd always hoped to being every time and every day that I had it, there was just nothing. There was no point. I didn't enjoy anything. I wasn't happy. There was no reason to getting up. I didn't have any love or any care for anyone. I was selfish. It's just empty. I was hollow inside. And I brought that attitude with me to the CBT. So while my experiences weren't entirely effective, please know that that was because I didn't give it its fair due. I didn't give it its fair account or its fair effort that I ought to have. I was about 17 to 19 when I was doing CBT. Yeah, I just didn't have a care about anything. I hated myself. I hated the world around me. I hated the world for what it was, and I hated me for being every reason why I was the way I was. And so this was just a thing which I kind of showed up to. I attended and did the thing and went away and never looked at the paperwork again. I could go home and pull out the paperwork and show it to all you like right now. None of it's filled out properly. I didn't give it a go. And that's a disservice to myself. Because having learnt the things that I've learnt, and having come from that place to where I am now, all of those tools and foundations that CBT tries to help you lay down for you to build upon are the things which I implement into my everyday life now. And I'm in a much better place than I was. I have those things which they were trying to give me. I didn't give them a go. I didn't act on them, and I didn't get anywhere for years. But now that I am doing something for myself, those are the things which I look back on and see that they were trying to help give me. Was it effective? No, but that's on me. I was the reason that it wasn't effective. It was nothing to do with them. There were times where I texted and said, I'm not going to show up today, because I didn't want to. I would rather have laid in bed and done something else, like played Xbox, or not feel like it. So it's not something I regret, because it's part of what's brought me to where I am today, but it's worth it. I should have given it the effort that it deserved in retrospect. Okay, speech therapy or counselling. This one came about, it was the most recent, I think I was about 21, 22. I was on the cusp of moving away to a university, and it was kind of my comeuppance from not giving, the CPT a proper go, because what not giving it a proper go meant was that I still had every issue that depression had kind of hunkered down and got its claws into me. They were still there. I was doing different things. I was doing a bit more, but those things were still a part of me. They were still there. And I felt that I had to excise them. I've always had a very active and busy mind, much to my own detriment. I happily say to this day that while my mind is my greatest asset, it is also my greatest adversary. It has given me so much, but I wouldn't be having a mental illness podcast if it wasn't the reason for giving me mental illness. There was just so much in my head. There are so many thoughts, many problems, many queries, many things that, while I was still, my lifestyle was a little bit docile in that. No, it wasn't docile. I lived within a very kind of, I lived within a bit of a sphere. There wasn't too much exploration. There wasn't too much socializing. I didn't have too many friends. Didn't have too much purpose. I didn't have a job. I existed insularly. And while I was growing up and developing and seeing all these people around me living their lives and, having teenage years and early 20s years, I felt very confined. And there was so much that I felt like I was missing out on or hadn't experienced. And again, I went back to my doctor, said, listen, doc, things still aren't right. And he said, okay, well, we'll try this one then. And this woman was a private counsellor, where the private therapist that was taking a look more psychologically at what was going on, what was making me tick and what was causing the problems within my head. The speech therapy /counselling is a very different approach in that it is essentially sitting down with somebody and talking. They facilitate you to talk about the things which are going on, which are causing you these problems. I imagine it takes a lot of refined training to know what to say, when to say it, and how to kind of incite these kind of dialogues that a person has from their consciousness or their conscience. I think that was, I look back fondly on that therapy because it was what I needed when I needed it. Not saying that I didn't need the others then, but it gave me a lot. I don't want to say it gave me clarity, but it alleviated so much of the pressure and the weight that was in my head. So much of the pressure and weight that I was putting on myself, so much of the unknown, so much of the if, buts and maybes of life, at that young age where you're looking forward to your whole life. My mind was riddled with thoughts going absolutely nowhere. It was a complete scramble in my head. And this was, as I've spoken about before, it's like as if you got a big jumbled up ball of wool in your head of thoughts, both helpful, not helpful, everything that you could possibly imagine. Those sessions were someone facilitating you, just slowly unwinding it, verbally getting it out of your system, having someone listen to you, to know that they're listening and to know that you can share these things with them. It was incredibly valuable, particularly someone of my disposition. This was, again, very much for depression. I was still struggling with it. And while I'd kind of not given CBT the fair dues that it deserved, this kind of facilitated me to develop my own tools to dealing with it. I'm feeling bad about not doing CBT properly, but it is what it is. From this, I developed my own reasoning, my own steps to, that's actually what it was called, steps to wellbeing, which kind of helped me know how to deal with my own problems a little bit better. Was it effective? Yes. For somebody who's living a very insular and isolated existence, something which I think is becoming more and more of a problem. The more screens that we're looking at, the more insular we're becoming. We're talking less face-to-face and more kind of screen-to-screen. There's only so much you can relay to somebody over a phone or over a snap or a message. And so having that organic dialogue with somebody, not only somebody, but a trained professional who can help kind of unravel the spool of jumbled chaos in your head. It was very effective and really, really helpful for me at that time in my life. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I've mentioned this already, one size does not fit all. The vast spectrum of the human brain and the vast spectrum of issues that we all face on a day-to-day basis. You can't go to the therapy shop, pick up a therapy, and be a satisfied customer with every purchase you make. I once knew a girl who, after I'd been through a lot of my stuff, I'm very passionate about helping other people. And I really wanted to help her because she meant a lot to me and we were very close at that time. And she was in such a difficult position and she was all on her own. I never really got to the bottom of what was causing this thing, because to me, in my position, that wasn't the important part. She'd never tried therapy. She'd never done it. And I was this big advocate for it because that is where I was and this is where I am now. And therapy was a big way of how I got from A to B. And yeah, she was fighting a lot of battles on her own, and I wanted to help her, and I wanted to do right by her and see her get better. So I asked her if it got to a point where I said, please consider doing this. Please just have a look, give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? And she did. She gave it a go, but when I spoke to her afterwards, she was a bit reluctant in talking to me about it. And she said, yeah, it was okay, but I just didn't feel like this person understood me, and they didn't listen to me, or what I said wasn't picked up by them. I was just like, oh, that's a bit odd. And she'd give another one a go, because I said, you get particular, it's an individual basis, isn't it? You don't go and see, you see one therapist who is their own person, and then they have their own practices and their own methods of doing what it is that they do. So she went and saw another one, and again, it wasn't working for her. And I was perplexed because I wasn't sure. And I felt really bad because this thing which had worked for me then hadn't gone and worked for her. And I felt an element of guilt in having asked her to do that. But also I felt bad in advocating for this thing which then didn't end up working out for her in the ways that she tried. And I'll always advocate for therapy if you need it, if there's something which is in you which is either repetitive or a cause for pain or stress, or something that you can't seem to get over, or something that's kind of obstructing your path to better well-being or your journey of self-improvement. I will always advocate for it, but it might not always work out first time. And for her, it didn't work out the first time, and it didn't work out for the second time. But what I want you to know is that just because it doesn't work once, doesn't work twice, doesn't mean it won't ever work. I don't believe within myself that there are people who aren't cut out for it. There are, of course, people who are of all kinds of dispositions and varieties. There are some people who do understand mental health. There are some people that don't understand mental health. But I don't believe that there are people who are beyond the possibility of getting better. I believe everybody can get better. And I believe in your ability to improve your own life. What I'm essentially saying is that even though it might not work out the first time or the second, please don't give up on yourself. If the end goal is you overcoming something, getting a bit further, making a bit more progress on your journey to self-improvement, please don't give up on yourself. Keep going. Keep fighting for a better tomorrow, because I believe that you can get better. And I believe that you have the strength to do that. So, I've talked about the ways in which I've done therapy, but what does it all quintessentially boil down to? What is the base layer of therapy? It's talking. It's having conversation. It's engaging in dialogue with people. One of the things that I want to do with the show is to bring guests on, ask them how they're doing, and then ask them how they're doing later. And the reason I mention that is because the first time I asked them, how are you doing? Whether it's a British thing to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you. Like, how are you doing? Or yeah, I'm okay, I'm good. It's very base. It's very, you're receiving the surface. But after these conversations that we have at the end of the podcast, once we've talked about these things, once we've established a trust wherein we can give our truths to each other, wherein we've had a discussion of things and we've given the trust to each other to be honest and open and vulnerable with each other, I guarantee, or my hypothesis is that I'll ask them again and they'll not respond with just the surface thought. They'll respond with what they're truly feeling. And that is a testament to what talking can do, or at least that's what I'm going to try and experiment, is the power of just having a conversation, a meaningful conversation with another individual where one person speaks openly and honestly and the other person listens with respect and compassion. It is like that wool analogy that I used. It is just dialogue. It is just feeding that stream of your thoughts and problems out of your mouth, and having somebody listen to them. It can be so empowering. It strengthens that bond that you have with this other person. It's somebody that you can lean on, and much goes the same for if you're that person that somebody can be listened to. Does that make sense? I don't think that made sense. And it's much the same if you're somebody that somebody else knows that they can listen to. There's so much that you can give somebody in just letting them know that you are willing to listen to them. Yeah, we're hypersocial beings. I think, I might be wrong, probably maybe dolphins, if anything, but we are hypersocial beings. No other animal except maybe dolphins communicate, engage in dialogue, discuss, and communicate the ways in which humans do. We've evolved to rely on one another through communication, or communication has become an incredibly predominant way in which that we rely on each other. But I think more and more in this day and age, with the screens in front of us, with social medias, with cameras, with computers, with consoles, the more screens we're looking at, the less time that we're spending talking to people, engaging with people, being in a room, having these organic conversations and dialogues and discussions. Because, I don't truly believe that you can have as organic and earnest a dialogue with somebody over a screen as you can with them face to face. There's so much you miss out on in the translation of it. But we need to lean on each other. We need to have those things in order to be there for one another, know that someone is there for you, and have that trust and faith and security in knowing that you're there for somebody else and that you can give that to somebody else. I will say that if you do want to talk to somebody, if you're thinking about talking to somebody, or there's something that you just want to get out of your mind and you want to unburden yourself with, that just be wary of who you talk to, because not everybody may be willing to listen, or at least listen to the extent that I'm talking about or you're wanting them to listen to. It might not be that they're having a good day, but just know that it can be highly dependable on either the individual or the circumstance. So having a bit of predetermined trust in the person that you're wanting to be vulnerable with, or the person that you're wanting to talk to, can go a long way in safeguarding the thing that it is that you're wanting to tell them. Because you don't want to talk to somebody and have it get blown off and then be like, oh, well, that was a fucking stupid thing to talk about, or I can't talk to this person. That this could be a matter of speaking to them before, say, I can have a word with you at some point, or when you're available, would you be able to have a talk to me about something, or something's on my mind, can we have a discussion about it? I think those things are a good idea if it's something that means a lot to you and something that you don't want to have blown up in your face or get blown up in your face about. So we're coming to the challenge of the week. We are rounding off this episode now, but before we go, I'd like to issue a challenge or a little bit of homework. And that is, if I know that we're all surrounded, we all at least have somebody that we care about and we love, whether it be friends or family. And the task for this week is, if you do have those friends and family that you care for and you would genuinely do a lot for, you do anything for, tell them. Tell them that you're there for them. Tell them that whatever it is that they're going through, you're there. I learned recently of this thing called a darkest hour friend. Like in Churchill's speech, he said that it's a matter of telling your friend, I'm with you. Whatever it is that you're going through, I'm there. You don't have to tell them directly. I know that direct dialogue like that can be difficult. So perhaps another way of doing it for you would be showing them rather than telling them. That can go just as far. Or just listen to them. You can tell somebody that you're there for them or show them that you're there for them by asking them how they're doing and then affording them the care and the security to actually listen to what it is that they have to say. Don't interrupt, don't cut them off, don't talk about yourself. Just open yourself up to them and the things that they have on their mind. Let them know that you're willing to receive what they have and what they wouldn't typically share with the world. That can do so much for somebody. Because I think if we hope to have people who are willing to do that for us, I think it is only fair that we should try and do that for other people. And if we can proactively do that for other people, then I believe that can spread. That can spread, and other people will start doing that for other people, and we can care for each other a little bit more. So that is the third episode of the Airing It Out podcast. I hope that's gone okay. It's difficult talking about therapy and just kind of bringing it back up. I don't have a problem talking about it, but it can be like emotionally cumbersome. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it, and you weren't just having to endure it. But either way, if you've made it to here, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. This has been a Common Bird production.